Ladies and gentlemen, we are now starting with part two of part one. And that doesn't make any sense to those of you just tuning in. But last week we were supposed to have John Whynot on as a guest, but the interview got erased thanks to my human error. That's the only thing I can blame it on because it's the only thing that makes sense. But somehow it disappeared. So I've managed to grab Johnny again here now on Saturday afternoon. John's back in his home in LA. And we're going to catch up and try and sort of recreate that little bit of lightning in a bottle that we had with part one last time. And I'm going to start it off with a very similar question, welcoming our good friend, my good friend, and hopefully your good friend later, John Whynot, to the program. John is an old friend of mine. We're going on about 2 decades worth of friends. He's done several records with me. We've just spent a lot of social time together, and he's one of my favorite people to talk to on the phone. John is, back in the early days, John played with everybody from Corey Hart through to the band and Rick Danko, Carol Pope, Blackie and the Rodeo Kings. You've done albums with Dave Matthews, Lucinda Williams, Blue Rodeo, sound scores for Ronin. What were some of the other ones? The Austin Power movies, the Last of the Mohegans. Grammy winner. You've been around the world when it comes to music, John. You've done rock and roll. You've done symphonic arrangements. As a person, when I sit down and talk to you, you force me to listen to music like Arvo Pärer and Rachmaninoff, and really challenge my brain.
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. It's one of the things that I love about you. But what I wanted to ask you, and what I was hoping we could sort of catch on, is the way that music has changed, in your opinion. We are two humans out of millions, living on this little rock, flying through time, and we're only here for a short time. But in this short time, like this, the last 100 years, music's changed so much. If you go back just past the 100 years, musicians were sort of non-entity people. They were people that existed for their own passion. In the last 100 years, we've taken the notion of a rock star or a musician, made them celebrities, and made them into famous, rich, important, powerful people. That's a brand new thing for us. The question that I'm having these days, and what I'm trying to get my head around, John, is all these changes in music that have happened, like in the last 100 years in particular. It's gone from an oral tradition to a recorded medium, and now the recorded medium it's taken on a permanence that changes our listening experience. And we talked a little bit about that, but the biggest thing is the change in music and where it's come from. It came from, like I say, the oral tradition of trying to remember a story of something that happened. And then we got into melodic and pop, hooks that kind of, earworms that make our brain feel good. And now we're heading into a time where AI is taking over. And I mean, I'm not saying AI is going to be in forever, because I really don't think it is. I think it's going to have a place. But these are the questions that I'm wondering these days, is like, what's happening with music, and what's happening essentially with the younger generation doing music? And you, being a professor at Berkeley, you are daily put in front of a select group of young musicians who are, starting out their world in a place where me and you look back and go, oh my God, what's happened? And they're looking at it afresh going, oh my God, what's coming up? So like, can you kind of put that together for me from your perspective, seeing these young kids and sort of seeing how they're adapting to the world and what you think has changed?
Well, that's a bit of a broad topic, but yeah, no problem. So that means they'll get us talking. Like, we need help talking. What's one of our characteristics as friends is that we can just say, hey, what's going on? And we don't even bother talking about hockey. We just go directly to like philosophical shit. And
I know.
A little bit of gossip here and there, but anyway, we can keep it going. But yeah, to me, I'm constantly thinking. I'm not constantly thinking about it, but I do think about what's changed and how I think more about how we feel about the change and what our perceptions are of the changes. Because one of the things I've been kind of on lately is the idea that, however it is when you start doing, like when I started being in recording studios or playing in bands, things were a certain way. And I mean, I know historically it's not true that it has always been that way, but there's a sort of kind of instinctive reaction to it that, oh, this is how it's always been. And so I'm stepping into an existing kind of structure that's relatively stable. And then along come these new things that screw it all up. And that's like, so you get a lot of that kind of, the good old days, and I'm not, just philosophically, I'm just not a believer in the good old days. There are days. That's it.
Yeah.
So I kind of take it as it comes, and I don't get too worried about, how it used to be and what's become of the grand old tradition of what I was doing in the 80s, or this, like the first recording session I ever was at was in, I think, 76.
Wow.
Probably 17, and it was with actually Garth Richardson was there. It'd be really funny if he ever hears this. Garth was the same age as me, I think. He might have been a year younger, and his dad had a recording studio down in Yorkville called H9 Recording, and he was partners with Bob Ezrin. I mean, this is, we're talking the mid 70s. The 60s we could still smell the 60s. They hadn't completely decomposed yet, and I don't know what kind of goofy thing we were doing, but I remember thinking, man, this is a really, really cool thing. And that's kind of the basis of my studio experience was, a MCI 24 track, a J16 24 track. And I don't know what the console was. It might have been a Sound Workshop, or I don't know what they had in there, but it was something foreign to me at the time. And then there's some glass. And then on the other side of the glass, there's a room, has all this weird muffling stuff on the walls, lots of microphones and bits of gear and stuff. And I was playing Fender Rhodes with a talk box. Fender Rhodes threw a talk box in. Like, what the hell is going on? I don't know. I can remember the tune too. It was not a very good tune, written by the I won't name him and I don't want to throw shade on him. He's a good guy. But anyway, and we're all high school kids basically. And but if I think back to that moment when, mid 70s, the idea of being in an independent recording studio with 24 tracks of gear and a bunch of preset mics and a sort of a situation like that, where you have a facility that's designed to be versatile and to accommodate wave after wave of artists and musician, whatever, that was less than 10 years old at that time. That was not a common thing. 10 years, 15, 20 years before that, in other words, in the blink of an eye before that, the studios were either owned by record labels and they were run by people who built them. And then that only, the guys, but just, for example, there's a couple of bigger, more famous facilities and stuff like that. Bill Putnam had built some stuff, but he built his shit in the early 60s. So it's 15 years before that, you think, man, that old, the grand old, classic room that is now East West Studios, that was United Western at one point. And they're not that old. So like, we think of it as a long tradition. It's not. There are no long traditions. We do everything really quick. And technology, the other thing also is, like, I think about also that kind of retrospective feeling that people have, because they're thinking, man, that was so cool when Led Zeppelin came out. And, it's so much less cool now. Like, we're just geeks now. Boy, those guys were super cool. And which, by the way, I don't know them very well. I don't really know them at all, but I think it's debatable how cool they were. But they were doing their, they made incredible records. Absolutely. So people are like, well, we want to record on a 1-inch 8-track. We want a Helios console. We want the same microphones, etc. And I can pretty much guarantee you that they were not thinking that way. They were not going, this modern recording here in 1968 it's kind of cheesy and crappy. We want to go back to the really old school stuff, the stuff that was back 50 years ago, which is 1918, which was like mechanical recording direct. They weren't thinking that. They were trying to be as modern as they could be. And that's one of the things that sort of changed, this idea that there's this long history. It's not very long.
No.
And they were, the gear they had was fine. It was good stuff, but it doesn't mean that because, it's not that wasn't what made them cool either. It was like they recorded with the best gear they had. If they had 14 SM57s that come Mackie 8-bus and 2 ADATs, they probably would have been able to make Led Zeppelin 1.
Yeah.
Might have been a bit of a challenge for Eddie, but I think they would have figured it out. And what would have mattered was what the group was doing and how that worked in the culture. That stuff is the same. The relationship also with the audience, I think, is in a lot of ways the same. There's a few things that are different, but there's subtleties, and they are all transitory. So another one of these concepts, like the idea of owning the music. Like, I'm going to go to the store and I'm going to buy this 12-inch hunk of PVC that's in a custom-made box, with artwork on it or a photograph or something, and I'm going to take it home, and as long as I don't scratch it too badly, it will be mine. And that idea is a 20th century idea. Never existed before that. If you wanted to buy a piece of music, you bought it on it that was printed, and your playback system was you and your fingers and your ability to read and play music, or your friends. If you wanted your music, you had to go where the musicians were. And the magic trick of being able to record it so that you could disconnect it from the moment and disconnect it from the geographic location and go somewhere else, you know, to get a recording of Hoagie Carmichael, and then you could be on a boat, a naval boat in the harbor at Plymouth in the UK. You could be a Canadian naval person and have this little Victrola, and you could stick your Glenn Miller record on there or your Hoagie Carmichael record on there. And it wouldn't sound the same, but it would invoke the experience. And part of that was just the actual noise coming at you and the song and the idea and the cleverness of it. But the other part of it was there's a sort of technological shift in our consciousness where we can remove things from the original event and have something symbolic of it. And then in a way we relive it. But we don't relive it as if we're there. We're not hallucinating. We don't think, man, look inside the box. Where are those musicians? Like we never fooled like that. You know what I mean? But you know, you'd be surprised how people assume that the idea behind recording is to have the same experience happen later on your speakers. It's not the same. It's symbolic of the experience. You're creating symbolism the same way storytelling is. Anyway, so I went kind of way off the deep end.
Oh, that's good. Actually, I like where you're going. That's good.
Yeah. What I'm saying is that it's different in some ways, but a lot of the stuff that connects with audiences is the same stuff that connected with audiences when recording first happened. And the big technological development, I think, was the notion of storing something that plays back in time, like music, and being able to move it someplace and being able to play it later, along with the notion of the simpler version of that, which is radio, which would break the geographic connection, but then you'd still be hearing stuff in the moment. And that took getting used to. People had to figure that out, but it didn't take very long. People adapt to this stuff really, really quickly, especially if other people are doing the same thing. So to me, that's really interesting. And it's still the same connection. You're still trying to invoke the idea of the whatever is expressed in the music later and somewhere else. That's it. And so how is it different with streaming? Well, we have, I think, a slightly less physical connection to it because we don't own it. So I don't know if you for sure made mixtapes for people. You might still do that. I don't know.
I haven't in a while, but yeah.
It's not the same as making a playlist for somebody.
No,
because the playlist is, first of all, it's much faster, much more efficient. Woo, yay! More time to surf TikTok. Yeah. But also it's less intimate. Is this a big problem? No, it's just the next thing. I don't think it's a big problem.
It's true.
I mean, if you decide when you're born, this is it. We are at the perfect moment in history. We've reached the peak of our experience. Everything about technology, culture, human existence has gotten as good as it can get, and from now on, it's all downhill. There's a lot of people who think that way, and I just don't, because it doesn't comport with the history. No.
Yeah, I've been guilty of it. You know, I've been guilty of it at times. I mean, I'm aware enough to knock myself out of it, but there's been times where it's like, oh man, that was such a great time. Why can't things be like that? And blah, blah, blah. And I mean, there's two parts to it. A, you know, this time is just as good as that time. It's just I'm in a different mood. And B, that time had a lot of shit too. I just chosen to forget about it. You know,
history's a great filter. It's like, I'm finding so much garbage in the top 100. Well, believe me, there was garbage in the top 100 in the 60s and the 50s.
Oh yeah.
And we just don't continue to play it. The stuff that we now play after all this time is the stuff that history's filtered out for us, and we kind of have that benefit of hindsight. And one of the amazing things about art is that great art changes you, and the greatest art changes you and reveals yourself to you. It shows you how your consciousness works. That's one of my operating theories of what is art.
Oh, okay.
And film is great for that, because it actually shows us how we think, how we track a story is built into how the actual medium works. Right. And that's modern enough that we can see it, which to me is amazing. So I'm a total, I'm a freak for this stuff. And I try and tell 20-year-olds this stuff, and they're like, okay, Mr. Magoo, like, what are you talking about?
Well, they
don't have Mr. Magoo as a cultural landmark, because they didn't know who Mr. Magoo was. Like people say, oh yeah, well, with studios, we had to build stuff. I had to hack together cables. So I had to become MacGyver. They're like, they don't know who MacGyver was.
Right.
It's too far back in history. So but anyway, so it's the whole, come unstuck in time, Billy Pilgrim, what's gone on? How's the world falling apart? It's nothing like it was. I don't understand it. This is just normal. This is how humans are when they get older. And if they have the privilege to live long enough, it all looks foreign and weird. And that's fine. That's not a sign that things are foreign and weird, particularly. They may be, but that's not the sign. That's not the indicator. So I feel good about that. I also hang around with 20-year-olds.
Tell me a little bit about that. So you're working at Berkeley.
Yeah.
You've got a class of
like I don't go to like the park where they're playing and hang around. I mean, I haven't where they show up,
but you've got a select group of kids. So Berkeley has a very small yearly admittance or semester admittance. It's quite pricey. It's not exclusive per se, but it's not a college with thousands of kids coming through you. You're getting pretty close to these kids. Talk a little bit about that experience, if you to try and sort of shed light on this. Like the kids, I'm really fascinated with. Like I remember when I decided I wanted to play music. My parents were like, "Okay, you can play music or you can go to school, but you can't do both. And depending on which you choose, you have a place to live." So I packed up my bass guitar and went and moved in with a friend. And that was the end of my family experience with my family having any say in my music career. I was going to play music. I was a Newfoundlander. I liked punk rock music. I had no teaching in my, I'd never had a teacher. I barely knew scales, but I just knew I wanted to do this. And I set out, with $60 in my pocket and one change of clothes, and I moved halfway across the country, and I slugged it out and slugged it out and slugged it out. And I'm 55 years old, and I'm still slugging it out, even though I've been luckier than a lot of people. I know my reasons for continuing to do music, but it seems like the kids nowadays, even in light of, there's no music, it's too rapidly changing, everything is the same, it's all Spotify and YouTube. There's still kids who are like, that's okay, I'm going to do that. And that's the kids that you're seeing. Can you talk a little bit about that experience?
Yeah. Berkeley's an interesting place. First of all, people know about it. And particularly musicians know about it. And it is a specialty school. There are some sort of neighboring specialties there too, but it's absolutely a music school. And by comparison, my house in LA is just down the road from a place called USC, which is a great music school and a great film music school, a great film school, etc. And hey, you see the door open?
Oh yeah, it's just
somebody peeked in. It's all good, and so we may get a visitor, but that would okay. Yeah, it'd be fine. But USC, which has all that stuff, I was talking to a friend of mine who was working there, and he said, "Yeah, it's cool, but the difference is that Berkeley doesn't have Berkeley does not have a football team. They don't have a medical school. They don't have a law school, etc." I mean, I'm short selling USC. It's probably 10, 20. I don't even know how many people are at USC, but it's many times the size of Berkeley. Berkeley's a small college. It's not that exclusive, but there's a built-in exclusivity in the cost. Boston's expensive. Right. It's a private school. There's a lot of facilities there. Living there is expensive. You if you're going to go there without some kind of scholarship or other kind of ride in there, it's going to cost you
a lot of money.
It's a big deal. And my personal feeling is, I actually think the idea of trying to, make it a richer kind of more of a exclusive kind of a experience, I think is wrong. I think they should be lowering the bars as much as possible. And to a certain extent, the philosophy of that school is pointed towards that. But of course, there's, you want to, they still are considered by some to be the best in the world. And that's a debatable point. I think they're really good. But, there are things about a college that are just sort of weird. But anyway, and it was weird. They hired me almost random. I was just sort of poking around, and I interfaced with somebody on this thing called the Facebook. You might have heard of it. It was like Anyway, it's still around. I actually was off of it for a long time at the advice of our mutual friend Jake. Jake said, "Hey, you should deactivate that. Your life will get better." And you know what? He was right. Anyway, yeah. Back a long story. Don't want to get there, but anyway, so the population I have in front of me is exclusive in a way, partly because they were inspired to seek that place out. And if you seek it out and you can figure out the money, you're in. It's like there are auditions and stuff, but they're flexible. You don't have to read music. You don't have to. It depends who you are. If you come there saying, "I want to be a virtuosic guitarist, they're going to expect that you're going to learn how to read, or at least figure out some substitute for that. So there, I mean, it's definitely, there's some of that. But the department that I teach in is music production engineering, and that is selective. The major is selective. It's competitive, and people have to, they're there for 2 semesters, and then they apply for it, and they have to convince us. And I'm on the committee that picks these people. And so, and that's fascinating, because the people from all over the world are doing this. And so the population that's in front of me, and I tend to teach seniors. I'm not that involved in the kind of incoming part of it. I'm not doing the sort of early technical stuff. That's just random. I could do that stuff, but it's just, I'm stuck usually with kids who are about to graduate. I say kids, they're fully adults. They're usually in their early 20s. And so they're
almost adults.
It's not a cross section of the population, I don't think. I mean, I don't know, because I don't know the cross section of the population, but it's not, I think it's likely skewed in some directions, both, I think, culturally, the idea that they're focused on music. Also, I think just in terms of intellectually, I think they're pursuing things that are a little bit more long-term and a little bit more, most of them are thinking like artists and thinking like on that kind of heavy, sort of adult scale. Like they're really trying to work this stuff out. So they're cool. But they're 20. They're like the fresh young end of Gen Z.
Yeah.
Several generations removed from me. And so it's really interesting to kind of, first of all, to try and understand how they see the culture and what are they looking for and what they pick up on. And they never disappoint. They're not all great students, but they're, generally speaking, the level of discourse is amazing. And if I get them interested in, and we get talking about the cultural side of things, they, of course, they're out of college. They want to figure out what all this stuff does. They want to learn the things.
Yeah.
And that's cool with me, but I'm not that interested. I'm less interested in the things. I'm more interested in broader concepts. And so if I poke them enough and tell enough jokes and kind of get them engaged, they actually are. They're totally there. It's amazing. They're thinking on intellectual levels. They may not be well read particularly, because they're this kind of specialist in what they're doing, but what they're into, they know, and they have lots of knowledge, and they get deep into it, and they work really hard to try and, they're trying to be there for 3 or 4 years and get out with some kind of idea, something that they can turn into a business or whatever. And they're all in, they're just like I was, just like you were probably. Well, I mean, you just told the story of how you were, just like we were. We were told that it was a bad idea to be a musician. Well, the entire culture is telling them that now, I mean, I think the entire culture was telling us that too, probably.
I think so.
So guitar is all right, John. You can't make a living out of it.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's generally true. It's a select few that can do it. And, I've been very fortunate, and I didn't I mean, I can make my resume sound good with you. So you can make my resume sound pretty good too. You just did that quite well, but it's not that notable. It's good enough. It keeps me going. I'm still into it. And I'm still challenged. But anyway, I sort of stacked into this gig. I was 55 years old. And I said, one thing led to another, a couple of conversations, a meeting, a presentation, all improvised by me, no plan. Just kept saying, well, would you be interested in this? I'm like, I don't know. I'll give it a shot. It's just weird enough. It could be kind of cool. Literally it. And then it turned out we were very simpatico. And one of the thing that attracted me to the place was, apart from the marquee value of it, what really attracted me was the other people there that were teaching already. I didn't know the students. I didn't have much experience with people 30, 40 years younger than me. So, but I figured I'll find out, but the people that were working there were really cool. They thought like I did. They were, I don't mean necessarily philosophically or politically, but they were digging in the same way that I've been digging. They're looking for the bigger truths, and they're finding it fascinating still. And I still do find it fascinating, including the top 100 on Billboard. I'm interested in that stuff. Because it's not the same. It isn't static. It's completely, it's like a stampede of craziness. All sorts of different things go on there. Do I listen to it? Do I care about it? Do I relate to the topics? No, I don't.
Yeah.
Most of the songs are about trying to get laid in a bar.
Yeah.
And that's just not something I'm doing.
They've been singing songs about getting laid in a bar for fucking as long as I can remember.
Yeah. And
that's also people between 19 and 30 try and do,
Oh yeah, and if it's men writing it, they're writing about the way women look.
Exactly. Yeah, no,
It's like, well, that's kind of shallow. It might be shallow, but it's wired into our species or whatever, or any species. I don't know. Anyway, but fine. I don't relate to it like that, but I hear it. I hear the creativity of it, and it's high end. There's a lot of work that goes into this stuff. It doesn't always nail me in the terms of the way Rachmaninoff might. Although once in a while I hear something amazing, and not everybody agrees with it. You know, there's a Cardi B song that I think is fantastic, and I was like, I absolutely relate to it. Which I think it's called Careful or Be Careful with Me. It's like, and it's just a cheesy little pop song, but man, it's really good. It's really expressive, and it's funny, and but heartfelt. Like it's also serious. You know, I'm like, okay, like
that's interesting.
I hate this. You know, I have to be a little careful about loving it, because it can kind of ruin it for a 20-year-old. If a 64-year-old person goes, "That's great," you know, they're like, "Oh shit!"
Yeah, exactly. Damn.
You know, the old Lemmy thing, you know, like if you remember what Lemmy saying about rock music, the idea is to make music that your parents hate.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I mean, now they're not all wired to the top 40 either, or top 100 either. They have their various things that they love, and they're trying to turn into music and trying to figure out how to make business out of it and stuff. So they're exploring, but they're all in. They're not the callow youth myth. It may exist. It doesn't show up in my classrooms at all. The people that show up in front of me are serious, and
they're ready to go.
And yeah, they're challenging. I wake up in the morning going, I got to bring some game here, because they can totally step around me. They're really smart, and it's the cure for that kind of gray-haired pessimism people have.
I just through combination of randomness, being available, having a slightly service-oriented mindset, which is I haven't always had, but definitely have it now. I got through an accident. I got this call from Berkeley to come and teach, and I said yes. And I didn't say yes right away. I thought about it, because I thought, what the hell am I doing there? But I had a chat with a friend of mine. And he said, you don't say no to this. If it doesn't work in 2 years, go back and tell everybody the stories of it. And I mean, he was right. And I was 55 years old, and I became entry-level educator, and I still feel like that's been 9 years, and I still feel that way. And it's nerve-wracking and fear-provoking, but man, what a gift that is.
Yeah.
Like I'm 64, and I'm still thinking about the next 10 years of work. And I'm not thinking of it. I mean, partly because, you know, my mom lived until she was 98. I better make some dough. Because if I just stop now, I won't have enough. But I mean, so, okay. Yeah. But the beautiful thing is, it's the challenge is what floats my boat, and it's not always 100%. It's not like I'm not skipping through the daisies every day, but it's a fantastic gift to find something that I can't do, that they want me to do. They want what I got. They want me to get better at it. They'll help me get better at it. And then also the students who are there are investing in it, you know? So my alarm goes off in the morning, and I wake up going, holy shit, I have to bring these people something valuable. And you do. They are not dumb. They're smarter than me. So I can't really fake it. I mean, I am sort of faking it, but I can't, you know. So, I mean, if you want my idea of, I mean, this is not what I was planning to do. You know, I'm not sure what I was planning to do, but it involved being a rock star, I think. But video killed the radio star there pretty good. But
well, but how cool at 64 years old to be you know, I mean, Jesus Christ, living the dream is you know, there are some of us who have lucked out. I consider myself amongst them too. John, thank you so much for taking your time twice now to chat on the show. And of course, you know, I mean, thank you for hanging out with me as we do every now and again. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, this is John Whynot. He's an old friend. He is a musician who has been in the business for as long as anybody I know, and he has hit through every angle. And at the end of the day, I mean, what I'm taking from you, John, is that the kids are as eager to do it as we were, you know, and as much as we had everything stacked against us, they have everything stacked against them too, but they're still going to find a way to do it. They're still going to find a way to get out and make their noise in a room with other people. And I think that's what is going to keep it alive myself. I think the live thing is that connection between humanity is what we're looking for in most everything. And I think that music is a really good example of that. You know, you can share You can share life experiences, you can share philosophies, you can share political activism, whatever you want. And it's good to hear that the kids are still doing it. I mean, I see it in my kids, but it's good to hear from a educator's point of view.